Hey everyone, it's Scott here again. It's good to be with you, bringing you this video from the COVID safety of my own home. I hope that you are well, that you're enjoying the beautiful spring weather, and I pray that you are able to cope with the lockdown restrictions that we're facing at this time. We've got another message for you out of the book of James, and so let's get into it. A couple of weeks ago, I tried making chicken laksa for dinner. It's tasty and pretty quick. It's a one-pot meal that everyone usually enjoys. Usually. In the kitchen, I'm normally a follow the recipe kind of guy. Our chicken laksa recipe is not much more than a list of ingredients with some arrows that say do this thing first and then do that and then add that. The ingredients included 3 cloves of garlic, a couple of tablespoons of chili sauce, a couple of teaspoons of coriander, and a tablespoon of ginger. Without even thinking, when I got the coriander out of the pantry, I grabbed a little box of ground ginger and plonked a tablespoon of that into the pot. Those with experience will know that ground ginger is best with sweet things, and that root ginger is for savories. Even I should have known. I'd managed to cook this meal successfully at least a handful of times in the past, but not this time. It was a disaster. It looked funny, it tasted funny. It was the weirdest chicken laksa I have ever had. Only one of the 6 of us seemed to enjoy the result, and it wasn't me. The recipe didn't specify ground ginger or root ginger. The assumption was that if I was attempting chicken laksa, I should know which type of ginger I needed. It wouldn't have mattered how well I memorized the recipe. It still wouldn't have helped me. It just said ginger. This week, my family let me try making chicken laksa for dinner once more, and this time being a little wiser following the prior tragedy with grated root ginger. And I'm pleased to say that it turned out as expected and everyone ate it. Study brings knowledge, but experience with reflection brings wisdom. Knowledge is understanding that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is understanding not to put it in a fruit salad. Today we are talking about true wisdom. For the last month and a half, we've been working our way through the book of James, instructions for a life of faith. And for those of you who have just joined us, where have you been? We started at the beginning, which Julie Andrews says is a very good place to start. And in chapter 1, I looked at the prize and the pain, before Jan worked through listen, accept, do. In chapter 2, we worked through and saw together that we don't play favourites, and faith must work. We started chapter 3 last week, where we saw that no one can tame the tongue. And if you've missed any of those messages, you can catch up with them all here on our YouTube channel. And so now we've reached the second half of James chapter 3, and we are looking at true wisdom together. Now, at this point in the message, if we were all together, I would get the whiteboard out and ask you all for a few questions and get you talking amongst yourselves, and I'd write all the answers up on the whiteboard. I can't exactly do that in the video. But just because we're not together, I'm going to ask that maybe you just pause the video and ask the people that you're with a few questions. So firstly, what is wisdom? What do we need wisdom for? And do you have any examples where you have needed wisdom? So you might want to pause the video right now and talk about those questions. Okay, time for a second lot of questions. Do you know someone who is wise? How do you know? How do you know they're wise? What makes them wise? Now you might want to pause the video again and just ask those questions amongst yourselves. For those who paused, welcome back. I hope the conversations were engaging. Let me know if you had any insights or breakthroughs in your discussion. And for those who didn't pause and cheated, it's not too late to have a quick chat now. I think a wise person is someone who I would ask for advice. When I was a teenager and through my early 20s, I used to watch the sitcom Home Improvement. In it, the hapless and clueless Tim the Tall Man Taylor would continually seek wise counsel from the older and more knowledgeable neighbour, Wilson Jr. In every episode, Wilson would say something wise that would apply to the mess that Tim had landed himself in. And nearly every time, Tim would totally misunderstand the words of wisdom or mangle the translation. Writing this message this week, I've reflected on all the people that I ask for advice. And the list is rather long. My wife, Sue, I talk to her about all sorts of things, and I ask her opinions on so many different things. She knows me best. She knows my heart. She knows my strengths and my weaknesses. And often she is able to tell me things that are hard for me to hear. My parents and my parents-in-law, I talk to them about a bunch of things too and ask them for advice on all sorts of stuff. Even my children, I seek advice about all those things that makes no sense to me and the things that make me feel old. Fashion, music, slang, what is trending and what is just so last year. In my role here at church, I seek the advice of the staff team, the elders, the admin team, different people in the church in different ministry positions, the other pastors I meet, regional leaders, the national leader, and my supervisor. And I ask different people about different things according to the area, the thing I'm asking about. There are a large number of people who are wiser than me in some area or another. And I feel so blessed to have them in my life and to be able to seek their wise counsel. Though, I must confess, I don't always take it. So, what is wisdom about? Wisdom is tied up with knowing. It's related, but it's not the same as knowledge. Knowledge, the knowing the tomato, is about knowing stuff. The capital of Azerbaijan, the melting point of tin, the temperature water boils at 4,000 meters above sea level, or all the names of the Kardashian family. And look, not only do I not have any idea who they all are, I don't think I could find an image that was appropriate for this video. So, yeah. Wisdom, on the other hand, is intrinsically tied to what we say and what we do. Wisdom is about making good choices with our words and with our actions. Wisdom is knowing the right thing to do and the right thing to say and the right time to do those things. Wisdom is choosing the right course of action. Knowing that you don't know everything is probably the wisest thing you can know. And in the passage we're looking at today, James contrasts two types of wisdom. From his perspective, there are only two types of wisdom. The wisdom that comes from God and everything else. Godly wisdom is not like worldly wisdom. Today, I'm going to read our passage the whole way through and then come back to it bit by bit. And it's in James chapter 3, verses 13 to 18. If you are wise and understand God's ways, prove it by living an honorable life, doing good works with the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you are bitterly jealous and there is selfish ambition in your heart, don't cover up the truth with boasting and lying. For jealousy and selfishness are not God's kind of wisdom. Such things are earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. For wherever there is jealousy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and evil of every kind. But the wisdom from above is first of all pure. It is also peace-loving, gentle at all times, and willing to yield to others. It is full of mercy and the fruit of good deeds. It shows no favoritism and is always sincere. And those who are peacemakers will plant seeds of peace and reap a harvest of righteousness. We are now at the point in the book where James is coming back to a number of themes he introduced at the start. And this is one of those issues introduced in week 1 that I said we'd come back to later. In James 1 verse 5, James said, "If you need wisdom, ask our generous God and he will give it to you." I don't think that James would have made such a statement if he didn't think that it was needed. He's basically saying, hey, some of you need wisdom. If you think it might be you, it probably is. And if you're sure that it isn't you, then it almost certainly is. But either way, that's okay, because you can ask God for wisdom and God will give it to you. And before you get all awesome, I need wisdom regarding choosing next week's lotto numbers, you know that's not the point. In chapter 1, wisdom was directly related to helping us endure through suffering. And here James's focus on wisdom is that we need it for what it produces in our lives. There are lots of things we need wisdom for. What were some of the things you thought about? In our house, our children are having to choose their subjects for next year from lockdown. And going into level 2 and level 3 NCEA next year, there's a bit of, I know my subject should be leading to a career, but I don't know what I want to do, so what subject should I choose? Wisdom is required for this. We need wisdom when choosing our subjects, when choosing further education opportunities, when choosing a career path. We need wisdom when applying for work. We need wisdom when deciding where we want to live. And we need wisdom in finding accommodation. We need wisdom about choosing who we spend our time with, who our friends are. We need wisdom choosing if we're going to get married and who to and when. We need wisdom in choosing when to start a family and when to stop. We all need wisdom in knowing God's direction for our lives. But James doesn't seem as concerned with all of that stuff as he does about what wisdom produces in our lives. Godly wisdom is not like worldly wisdom. If you are wise and understand God's ways, prove it by living an honorable life, doing good works with the humility that comes from wisdom. So James begins with a rhetorical advice. You think you're so smart. Who do you think you are? Most other translations start this verse with the question, who is wise and understanding among you? James is writing to at least some people who either claim to be wise, or they see themselves as wise, or they simply don't see the follow of their own behavior. James says that with true wisdom comes humility that leads to good actions and good interactions. Humility isn't often at the top of the list for virtues of success. It's not on Stephen Covey's list of 7 habits to be highly effective. Lately Google has been targeting me with ads about grit, which is a fancy word for tenacity. Brene Brown tells me that I need to dare greatly, quoting US President Teddy Roosevelt. These are all good things, and some have aspects associated with humility. But when we see successful people in person and on TV and the internet, there are lots that aren't humble. Some people will tell you it's all about attitude. And attitude is a can-do attitude, a winning attitude, a positive attitude, a never-say-die attitude. This is not necessarily one of humility. But James says humility is the hallmark of true wisdom. If you're truly wise, you'll know that it's not all about you. You'll know that it doesn't all rise and fall on you. You're a part of a team and you play your part. There are factors outside your control that can work in your favor and against you. Humility allows us to be gracious when we deal with other people. Humility helps us to see that those things, whatever they are not beneath us. Jesus was humble. And when Paul tells us in Philippians to have the same attitude as Christ, humility is the main theme in that passage. Godly wisdom leads to humility. Godly wisdom is not like worldly wisdom. But what about that other kind of wisdom? But if you are bitterly jealous and there is selfish ambition in your heart, don't cover up the truth with boasting and lying. For jealousy and selfishness are not God's kind of wisdom. Such things are earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. For wherever there is jealousy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and every kind of evil. The other kind of wisdom is the opposite of humble. James says that the other kind of wisdom is jealous and selfish. Selfishness is pretty easy to understand. It's all about me. Because let's face it, I'm worth it. I grew up with McDonald's telling me you deserve a break today. And Sprite told me to obey my thirst. And Nike inspired me that if I felt like anything at all, I should just do it. So much of our society is geared towards encouraging my selfishness. I'm almost incessantly encouraged to give in to my cravings, to eat whatever I like, to buy whatever I like, and do whatever I like. And when this is pushed to the extreme, my whole life becomes all about me. Other people fit in my life in proportion to their ability to make me happy and meet my needs. And this selfishness is equated with wisdom. You must do what's best for you. You must seek to maximize your own happiness. You must try and increase your net worth because this will enable you to be happy. Look out for yourself because no one else will. Selfish ambition is worldly wisdom, but godly wisdom is not like worldly wisdom. Jealousy as a concept is a little trickier. Believe it or not, jealous and zealous come from the same Greek word, xylos, via Old French and Latin respectively. And for the sharp-eyed out there, it also has an association with the name of our country. This word comes to us in the English New Testament as jealousy when being used negatively and zeal when used positively. In both, there's a sense of relentlessness and energy. Jealousy and zeal are words of passion. The root word xylos relates to the verb to boil, and it's linked to heat and burning. There's a fire within us that fills us with energy, for good or for bad. And I think there's also a sense of focus here. Xylos does not describe generally energetic and passionate people. It's energy that is focused on an object, a person, a place, or an activity. There is something that we are passionate about. We are jealous or zealous about that thing, and it fills us with energy. Because James introduces jealousy with bitterness, we can immediately see that he has negative associations here. This is not a good type of jealousy. This is not good energy. It's an energy that is self-absorbed and self-focused. James says that this is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic, and that it will only lead to disorder and evil of every kind. Yet again, James doesn't seem afraid to mince his words. In the midst of this, we have this phrase, don't cover up the truth with boasting and lying. I think that James is further commenting on those who are jealously pursuing all their selfish ambitions. They think that what they're doing is actually wise. Just like those I've seen striving so hard to climb a ladder that led to more money, more stress, more time at the office, and fewer real relationships. James tells us that if we think that what we're doing is wise, we are lying to ourselves. Selfish, jealous, worldly wisdom is not the type of wisdom that we should be seeking. Ever. It leads only to pain and suffering. Godly wisdom is not like worldly wisdom. But the wisdom from above is first of all pure. It is also peace-loving, gentle at all times, and willing to yield to others. It is full of mercy and the fruit of good deeds. It shows no favoritism, and it is always sincere. And those who are peacemakers will plant seeds of peace and reap a harvest of righteousness. Here, James has a list of what the wisdom from above, godly wisdom, is all about. Godly wisdom is pure, peace-loving, gentle, yielding and compliant, merciful, good, impartial, not playing favorites, sincere, not hypocritical or divided. And it is the seed of justice and righteousness. So, first up, what an awesome list. There are elements of this list that remind me of two of Paul's rather more famous lists. The fruit of the Spirit, not a coconut, in Galatians 5, and the list of love in 1 Corinthians 13. And I don't know why we don't talk about this list with the same frequency or as enthusiasm as we do those. This isn't just a random list of all the good things James could think of. James makes it clear that godly wisdom is the opposite of worldly wisdom in almost every direction. It is not selfish. No, it is gentle, compliant, merciful, and impartial. It is not driven. It is peace-loving. It does not lead to lying or boasting. It is pure and sincere. And it doesn't lead to disorder and evil, but peace and righteousness. It's not full of pent-up energy boiling with jealousy. It is humble. Godly wisdom is not like worldly wisdom. The list of godly wisdom has a level of humility that for me feels almost out of reach. But thank God that this isn't simply a measuring stick. It's not just a list to ask, how am I measuring up? Look, while it can be something we use to see how much godly wisdom is at work in our lives, it is more than that. This is a list of things that we get when we ask God for wisdom. Remember what James told us at the start of the book. If you need wisdom, ask our generous God and he will give it to you. If you need wisdom, all you need to do is ask. And this is James's version of saying, but wait, there's more. When you ask God for wisdom, you don't just get wisdom. You get all those things in your life that you need to produce good works with humility. When we get God's wisdom, just look at what we can become. First of all, pure, peace-loving, gentle at all times, and willing to yield to others, full of mercy and the fruit of good deeds, showing no favoritism and always sincere. As peacemakers, we will plant seeds of peace and reap a harvest of righteousness. James is showing us who think we are wise that, well, we really aren't. Worldly wisdom only leads to trouble. But that's not the end of his argument. James is inspiring us to see what can be. From what James has already said and what we're going to be covering in the next few weeks, it's clear that the early church James was writing to was faced with people who were saying pretty nasty things about one another and claiming to be the ones who knew everything. James says it doesn't matter how right you think you are. If your life doesn't measure up, what you think you have and what you think you know isn't of any use. The wisdom they think they have isn't from above, and it doesn't produce the same fruit that James says results from godly wisdom. So at the start of the message, I asked us to think what we need wisdom for. And I think from James's description of wisdom, we all need wisdom for everyday life. And we all need it a lot more than we realize. Godly wisdom is not like worldly wisdom. It is so much more. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for all the wise people you have placed in our lives. And God, we thank you for your promise that when we need wisdom, all we need to do is ask. Lord, I thank you for all the things that having godly wisdom does in our lives. And I pray that our lives would produce good works with humility, that we would be pure and peace-loving, gentle, merciful, compliant, good, impartial, sincere, and that we would see the fruit of righteousness from our actions. Amen. God bless you this week. I pray that you would know God's hand upon you, that as you seek God's wisdom this week, that you would know God's work in your lives, producing humility and good works. God bless.